She thought she was doing the right thing. Every morning she lit a candle, sat in stillness, and asked, "Please, let it happen. Please let the money come. Please let the pain end. Please let someone see me, finally." It felt like faith. It felt sincere. But something was off. Weeks passed, months. The outside didn't move. The silence grew heavy. She began to wonder, why does it feel like the more I ask, the less I receive? And that's when the crack appeared. Not in the world, but in her idea of how it worked. Because to ask, she realized, is to affirm something terrifying, that you do not have, that it is far, that you are separate. This is the invisible mistake of asking. It wears a spiritual face. It dresses itself in devotion and effort, but beneath it is the voice of lack. Neville said it with piercing clarity. To pray successfully, you must pray as if it is already done. You do not beg for what you are. But no one had told her that. Not in school, not in church, not in the world that taught her that worth must be earned and gifts must be deserved. So she asked, like a beggar at the gate of her own kingdom. She didn't know that asking from a place of lack sends a clear command to the universe. This is my state I do not have. And reality, neutral, perfect, exact, echoes that state without question. Neville called it the law of assumption. Not the law of wishing, not the law of hoping. You assume the state. You become the version of yourself who already has. But most don't. They stay in limbo, half spiritual, half fearful, thinking that repetition and sincerity will eventually unlock the door. They don't see that every plea is a lock in disguise. Every please is a quiet, "I'm not enough." She began to see it now. The difference between two voices. The first says, "I hope I can have it." The second says, "It's already mine. I am that." The first voice is noise. The second is command. But here's the deeper trap. Many who learn about manifesting stop asking with their lips, but keep asking with their hearts. They say the words, "It is done," but feel inside, "I hope it works." The universe doesn't hear what you say. It feels what you are. So asking isn't just about language, it's about vibration. It's about state. To stop asking means something radical. You must leave behind the identity of the one who waits. This is what scares people, because asking feels safe, familiar. To command feels arrogant, dangerous, but it's not. It is the most natural thing in the world. A seed doesn't ask to become a tree. It assumes its own destiny. The sun doesn't beg to rise. It simply does. And you are no different. She looked back at the years she spent waiting, and she whispered something small, something sacred. No more. No more begging, no more hoping, no more pretending that power is outside of her. From now on, she would feel it real. She would walk as if it were already done, and let the world adjust. Because the truth is simple. You don't ask reality to change. You change your identity, and reality follows. And that's the mistake no one sees, that asking isn't the beginning of manifestation. It's often the thing that blocks it. If this truth is already opening something inside you, subscribe now. We're going deeper into what no one teaches, but everyone needs to remember. The difference between the supplicant and the creator. There are two types of people. They may look the same, pray the same, even speak the same affirmations, but they live in completely different realities. The first is the supplicant, the second, the creator. And the difference between them is not subtle, it is vast, it is spiritual, it is everything. She didn't know at first which one she was. She believed in God. She read the books, she meditated. But deep inside, her prayers still came from a place of need. That's the mark of the supplicant. They live in the waiting room of life. Always asking, always hoping, always wondering why things aren't moving. They believe the power is outside. They hope something greater will notice them, favor them, bless them. And in that waiting, they stay small. Neville Goddard was clear. You are the operant power, not a servant of fate, but its author. To be the creator is not to be arrogant. It is to wake up, to realize that the thing you seek, you already are. The creator does not beg. The creator does not wait. The creator assumes. She began to see the difference in herself. The supplicant asks, "Will it happen for me?" The creator states, "It already has." The supplicant prays to something. The creator creates as something, and the shift is internal. It's not louder, it's quieter, it's not more effort, it's more awareness. The supplicant asks, "Why won't life give it to me?" The creator asks, "Who must I become to match the life I desire?" And then becomes it. But this is the part that hurts, because it requires the death of an identity. The identity of the victim, the identity of the unworthy, the identity of the one who is not yet ready. Most people cling to that identity, even as they affirm the opposite. They say, "I am abundance," but feel inside, "I hope I get by." They say, "I am loved," but their posture says, "Please don't leave me." That is supplication wrapped in spiritual language. The universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your posture of being, and posture doesn't lie. So what does it mean to be a creator? It means you wake up in the morning and decide how life will meet you, not based on logic, not based on yesterday's failures, but based on one radical assumption: I am that I am. Neville's words echoed now more clearly than ever. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to live from the end, not toward it. The supplicant is always moving toward. The creator begins at the end. The supplicant says, "One day I'll be." The creator says, "Now I am." This is not a game of make-believe. This is not lying to yourself. It is the highest form of honesty, claiming the truth of who you are before the world catches up. She remembered the moment she crossed the line. It was not a ritual, not a vision board. It was a whisper in the dark, "I'm done begging." And then she breathed, not in anxiety, but in knowing. She did not wait for the phone to ring. She felt what it would be like if it had. She didn't chase the outcome. She became the person who already had it. And in that quiet, invisible shift, the universe obeyed. Not because it had changed, but because she had. This is the truth no one teaches. You are not the one hoping for power. You are the one power hoping you'll remember. If something inside you is remembering, subscribe, not for more information, but to keep returning to who you truly are. Feeling is the prayer. She had said the words over and over again, affirmations taped to mirrors, scripts repeated each morning, declarations written in journals like spells, but nothing changed. And so the frustration grew. What else am I supposed to do? Why won't it work? The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was waiting. Waiting for her to feel what her words refused to carry, because words without feeling are empty vessels. Neville said it like thunder wrapped in silk. Feeling is the secret. Not recitation, not effort, not repeating until your throat aches, but emotion, presence, the inner vibration of "I am." That is the real prayer, not what you speak, what you embody. But she hadn't been taught that. No one told her that feelings were the code of creation. She had learned to hide them, to numb them, to bury them under logic and being realistic. She thought she could outthink the universe. She thought manifestation was about repetition, not resonance. But the universe doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you feel as true. So even as she declared abundance, she felt lack. Even as she said, "I am love," she feared being left behind. And that's the silent contradiction. You cannot fool the law. The subconscious, the womb of reality, only accepts what is impressed upon it with feeling. Neville said it plainly. The subconscious does not argue with you, it accepts feeling as fact. So what you feel becomes. Not later, now. She began to understand that her words were not wrong, but they were hollow. They lacked life. They lacked belief. And belief is felt, not proven, not measured, felt. That's why pretending doesn't work. That's why chanting without emotion leads nowhere. The real secret isn't saying it's done. It's feeling the relief of it being done. She tried something different. Instead of repeating the affirmation again, she asked herself one question: how would I feel if it were already true? The moment slowed. She breathed deeper, not to force a feeling, but to invite it. Relief, gratitude, stillness. It wasn't fireworks, it was peace. A soft, sacred peace that whispered, yes, this is it. This is the frequency. She lingered there, and for the first time she didn't feel like she was reaching. She felt like she was remembering. Neville called this living from the end. It means you don't look around for evidence. You close your eyes and become the evidence. You imagine the wish fulfilled. You feel its reality now, and that feeling impresses the subconscious. That feeling shapes the world around you, because the feeling is the command. She finally saw why it hadn't worked before. It wasn't because she was doing it wrong. It was because she was doing it without emotion. Her heart wasn't in it. Her body didn't believe it. She was going through motions, not transformation. But when she shifted from saying to feeling, everything softened. Then everything began to move, because life does not respond to logic. It responds to alignment, and alignment is not a thought. It is a frequency. So if you've been speaking your desires into the air, but nothing echoes back, ask yourself, have I felt it as real? Not for 5 seconds, not just on Sundays, but long enough for your nervous system to relax, long enough to stop looking for proof, long enough to believe. Because in this work, belief is not mental, it is embodied, and that is the prayer that is always answered. If something in your body feels this as truth, subscribe, not just for knowledge, but for remembrance. The secret behind the command. She once thought commanding meant force. She imagined a voice booming into the sky, demanding that reality bend. She believed, like many, that to command was to control. But now, she knew better. The true command isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, it isn't frantic, it is still, it is quiet, because it comes from knowing. Neville said it with divine clarity. You do not command the universe as a tyrant, but as its author. You do not argue with the law, you assume. Command is not shouting, it is assumption with identity. When the artist paints, she doesn't ask the canvas for permission. She moves with intention, with vision, with calm authority. That is command. The secret behind the command is certainty, not ego, not proof, but the internal click of, it is done. She remembered the moment she tasted that kind of stillness. It wasn't dramatic. There were no angels or lightning bolts, just a breath and a knowing. No resistance, no backup plan, just the quiet birth of a new identity. She didn't say, I hope it happens. She didn't ask the universe to listen. She simply entered the scene, as if it already had, and that was the command. Because when you live from the result, you no longer need to chase it. You become magnetic, and reality, like a mirror, must reflect back what you are. But most never learn this. They think commanding is about emotion, or scripting, or telling the universe what to do. But the true secret is this. The command is not a performance. It's a posture. When you embody the result, you don't have to convince anyone, not even yourself, because you've stopped hoping and started becoming. That's what makes it powerful, not the tone of your voice, but the stillness in your being. Neville said it plainly. Your assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. That's command. It begins as an inner choice, repeated with feeling, held in the silence, and confirmed by life itself. She understood now that the command is not a demand. It is a declaration. It says, "This is who I am now, and the world will catch up." That's not arrogance. It's alignment. Because she was no longer reacting to the world. She was originating it. She stopped checking the clock, stopped watching the numbers, stopped needing evidence to believe, and as her inner posture shifted, so did the outer world. Opportunities came, conversations changed, synchronicities appeared, not because she forced them, but because she no longer needed them to validate her identity. She had already chosen, she had already become. That was the secret behind the command. The world is not moved by noise, it is moved by resonance, and the one who truly commands does not beg, does not plead, does not chase. They assume, and assumption, felt as true, is the most sacred command of all. Silence as a creative power. She used to think silence was emptiness, a void, a pause between events, something to be filled with words, plans, questions, effort. But now, silence had become sacred because she began to notice something strange. The more she talked about what she wanted, the further it seemed to drift. The more she explained, defended, justified, the more confused she became. And yet, in the rare moments she said nothing, when she sat still, eyes closed, breath soft, something moved. It wasn't visible, but it was real. It was alignment. It was power. Neville said it without hesitation, "Be still and know that you are." She finally understood. Silence is not passive. It is not weakness. It is not absence. It is presence. Pure, undiluted, creative presence. When you stop speaking, stop reacting, stop affirming from desperation, you return to your source. Not the version of you who needs to manifest, but the version who already has. That version doesn't need to convince. That version doesn't need to perform. It simply exists in full possession of its truth. She remembered how hard it was at first. To sit in silence, to do nothing, to trust without words. It felt like giving up. But in reality, it was surrender. Not surrender to the world, but surrender to identity, because the one who truly assumes and doesn't need to speak, the seed makes no sound beneath the soil, but it is growing, it is alive, it is becoming, and so was she. Neville taught that the feeling of the wish fulfilled must be assumed in the silence, held without contradiction, accepted as done, and then life conforms. But most can't bear the silence. They want to see. They want proof. They want to talk about the manifestation until it arrives. But silence is the test. It's where the true shift happens. Not in words, but in stillness. Because when you stop talking, you begin listening. And what you hear is not the voice of fear, not the noise of the world, but the subtle whisper of the I am. She heard it now. It didn't shout. It didn't beg. It simply said, "You are." That was enough. She no longer needed to declare 10 times a day. She didn't need to post about her journey, explain her alignment, or analyze her blocks. She sat, she breathed, she imagined the end, and felt it real. Then she walked in silence, not as someone hoping, but as someone certain. That silence was her command. It wasn't about hiding. It wasn't about avoiding life. It was about creation, because in silence, you hold the image. In silence, you embody the feeling. In silence, you become. And what you become in silence must echo into form. That's not philosophy. It's law. The outer world is a shadow, and silence is the projector. She had spent years trying to talk things into existence. Now she knew silence creates faster than speech. Stillness moves more than noise, and assumption held in the quiet is the loudest declaration you can ever make. If this silence feels like home to you, subscribe. Let this remembrance continue in stillness and truth. How to assume the desired state. The question rose softly in her mind, not from confusion, but curiosity. If I am the creator, how do I become what I desire? Neville's words echoed, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. But what does that truly mean? It's not pretending. It's not wishing harder. It's not forcing yourself to believe. It's embodiment, assuming the desired state is becoming the version of yourself who already is what you desire, and then living from that place. It is not performance, it is permission. She realized that for years she had tried to attract something outside of her, but now she was being invited to shift within, to change her identity, not her situation. She sat down quietly, eyes closed, and asked herself the most important question. If it were already done, how would I feel right now? Relieved, grateful, at peace? She let the answers rise, not mentally but physically. She felt her breath slow, her shoulders soften, her chest open. That feeling, gentle, subtle, alive, was the assumption. Not a fantasy, not imagination as escape, but imagination as creation. She didn't just see herself with the result. She entered the scene. She didn't watch from outside. She became the one living the fulfilled life. Neville called this the art of living in the end. It's not just seeing the future, it's stepping into it emotionally now. So she did. She walked across her living room as if the call had already come. She smiled at strangers as if the love she longed for had already arrived. She answered emails as if her business was already thriving, not to pretend, but to train the body to feel what the soul already knew. That assumption, when repeated, becomes reality, not by pushing, but by matching. Because you don't get what you chase, you get what you are. Neville was relentless about this. If you persist in assuming that which you wish to possess, it will become yours. And persistence doesn't mean strain. It means repetition with sincerity. It means re-entering the feeling each day, each hour if needed, until it becomes normal. Until it no longer feels like trying to manifest. It just feels like you. That's when the outer world shifts. Not because the universe was convinced, but because you were. She noticed something beautiful happen. The more she lived from the state, the less desperate she became. And the less desperate she became, the faster things flowed. Because desperation is distance, but assumption is union. She stopped looking at her vision board. She stopped watching the numbers. She stopped checking for signs. Not because she gave up, but because she had already entered the state. And once you're in the state, you don't need proof. You are the proof. She still had moments of doubt. The old identity whispered sometimes, but she returned again and again to the question, how would I feel if I were already the one? And then she became her. That is the quiet art of assumption, not a technique, a return to the most powerful truth. You already are. You only need to feel it, long enough for the world to agree. Testimonies and synchronicities. It began subtly. A missed call from a number she didn't recognize. An old friend reaching out. A small deposit she wasn't expecting. It didn't look miraculous at first, but something had shifted. Not outside her, within. Because she wasn't watching these events with hope anymore. She was watching them as confirmation. This is the nature of synchronicity. When assumption becomes stable, life rearranges itself quietly, as if it had always been this way. Neville said, "The world cannot change until you change your concept of yourself." And when she did, reality followed. Not instantly, but certainly, because creation is not sudden, it is unfolding. And as she held the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the fabric of the outer world began to respond. She heard others share the same story. A man who had assumed he was already employed and received an offer days later without applying. A woman who imagined herself cradling her child and conceived after years of struggle. A young artist who walked as if his work was already valued and was discovered through a random message online. These weren't coincidences. They were echoes, reflections, responses to a new frequency being held with quiet conviction. Not every story was dramatic. Some were small, sacred, subtle. But each one confirmed the same truth. The outer mirrors the inner, without exception. And yet, the miracle was never in the result. The miracle was the transformation. To go from doubt to knowing, from fear to peace, from waiting to being. That was the real testimony. She no longer needed to prove the law. She had lived it. And so she relaxed, not because everything was perfect, but because she no longer chased outcomes. She watched life unfold with reverence, not urgency. Because she knew, deep in her bones, that assumption held with feeling must become form. Even delays were no longer painful. They were reminders to return inward, to stabilize the state, to walk again as the one who already has, to feel again as the one who already is. That's when the synchronicities multiplied, not because she became good at manifesting, but because she had become consistent in being. This is what Neville meant when he said, "You do not manifest what you want. You manifest what you are conscious of being." And her consciousness had changed. Now she was no longer the seeker. She was the center, not waiting, commanding, quietly, humbly, fully. And so are you. If you've ever felt that strange moment when the world reflects back something you imagined, you already know. You're not chasing miracles. You're revealing what's already true. So trust the echoes, trust the patterns, trust the timing, but above all, trust the state. Hold it, become it, live from it, and reality will follow. It always does. If your life has already started echoing this truth, subscribe. You're not just manifesting, you're awakening. Please hold. Here is the conclusion. Stop asking, start being. She looked back, not at the world, but at herself. The one who used to plead was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, more certain, unshaken. She no longer needed to ask, because she had remembered who she was. She was not the beggar outside the gates. She was the architect, the inner cause of every outer event. Neville's teachings were never meant to inspire belief. They were meant to ignite remembrance, to awaken you from the illusion of separation and return you to authorship. Because when you know, truly know, that you are the operant power, you stop looking for signs, you stop seeking permission, you stop asking the universe, and you begin commanding it, not with noise, not with force, with stillness, with feeling, with assumption. And that is where your new life begins, not out there, in here. So if you've watched this far, it means something in you is already shifting. You're not learning, you're remembering. So breathe and say nothing. Just feel the truth settle into your chest. You already are, it is already done. And now, you simply walk as if it's true, because that is what commands the universe. In the next video, discover why wanting too much actually repels what you desire, and how to break the cycle of endless longing.